From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made on February 7th, 2007, when a bipartisan majority of the New York State Legislature chose Tom DiNapoli to be the next state comptroller. DiNapoli had spent 20 years in the Assembly himself before his elevation to one of the top jobs in the state. And nearly 2 decades later, Tom DiNapoli is still the comptroller. He was elected in 2010, 2014, 2018, and 2022. And in 2026, he is running for re-election again. DiNapoli has a challenger in the Democratic primary this year, Drew Warshaw, who joined us on Connections about a month ago. And Warshaw, if you heard, has leveled a heavy critique of DiNapoli, saying that DiNapoli has failed at the most critical aspects of the job, including the protection of New Yorkers' money. As always, we invite the candidates for office to join us on this program. This is an office that a lot of listeners still tell us they don't often know everything that it does. So it's the state comptroller. Tom DiNapoli is back with us, and we're going to talk about the role of this work and how he views his own record and why he wants another term. Mr. Comptroller, welcome back to the program. Nice to have you.
Evan, nice to be back with you.
So we always start by asking people who are running for re-election, given how difficult it is to serve in government, why do you want to keep doing it? Why are you running for another term?
Oh, I wouldn't say it's difficult to serve in government. I think government service is a very important responsibility. It's been my privilege to be elected to office, first by my neighbors in my home community to the Board of Education, then by a larger group of my neighbors to the State Assembly. It was great to represent a community where I grew up. And then, as you point out, a little bit of history, back in 2007, when this office was mired in scandal, my predecessor had to resign, as you know, ultimately went to prison. Under the state constitution, it's the responsibility of the legislature, sitting as a unicameral body, to choose the individual to fill a vacancy in the office of Attorney General or State Controller. And that's happened a few times over the years, both the AG's office and the Controller's office. So it was a real humbling moment when folks who know you pretty well, because as you pointed out also in the setup, I had served in the legislature, so people knew what I was about, and they had confidence that I could restore trust in this office. And certainly my work every day since then has been to maintain the high standards and reputation of the Controller's office. First of all, for doing our job credibly and honestly, even if people may not agree with everything that we do. I want to make sure that people understand that I'm not fulfilling the duties of this office for my own enrichment. It's really to serve the people. And the Controller's office does have a rather unique mission, a very important one in state government. And what makes my job perhaps not so difficult is that I have about 3,000 colleagues who staff this office who are very dedicated public servants, largely civil service office, members of PEF and CSEA who work very, very hard to fill all the great responsibilities of this office, and they do it with a great deal of dedication. So it's a privilege to serve the people of New York, and every day is a joy to try to keep government moving in a positive direction.
I know you've met New Yorkers over the years who will stop and say, Controller, tell me again what that is. So what's the short description you give on the street when you meet people who want to know more about what the job is?
So we're the office that serves as the chief fiscal officer for the state. So we have an important role in terms of oversight of state finances. That doesn't mean we decide the state budget. The policy choices of how much money is going to be spent where is the responsibility of the governor or the legislature. But we obviously comment on state fiscal practices. And most importantly, when the legislature and the governor make the decisions on where the money is going to go, we're the ones that follow the money. We make sure the money goes to Monroe County and school districts in Monroe County. We make sure that if it's a vendor that has a contract with the state, that they're getting paid. If you're a nonprofit getting a state grant, we are the final sign off on the paperwork for you to get that grant. If you're a state employee, we're the ones making sure you get paid. And we have an audit responsibility. We are the office for auditing. So accountability and transparency is key. We do audits of state agencies, public authorities, local governments all across the state. So those are thousands of entities. So we, essentially on a risk assessment basis, every year we have an audit plan both on the state side and on the local government and school district side. And we look for opportunities to make government more efficient, save taxpayer money. We have an investigations unit if our audit uncovers wrongdoing, people stealing public money, and that happens sometimes. We then work with law enforcement, typically the Attorney General's office, Tish James's office, local district attorneys or U.S. attorneys to hold people accountable, get restitution of stolen taxpayer money. And of course, we have a very important responsibility in managing the state's pension fund. So 1.2 million New Yorkers are part of that pension system, either as active employees in state or local government or school districts, or retirees or beneficiaries. So that providing that retirement security, that safe pension, obviously is a very important part of the responsibility. There are other miscellaneous responsibilities of managing the 529 College Savings Program, the New York ABLE program for people with disabilities, helping to manage the state's oil spill fund, returning people's lost money with unclaimed funds. So there's a lot that we do. And I have, as I said, a very dedicated group of professionals that I work with that do a very good job and make me look good.
We're talking to Tom DiNapoli, the New York State Comptroller, who is running for re-election. His website is DiNapoliforNewYork.com if you want to learn more and see the official campaign website. And and
more importantly, Evan, people should go to our New York State Comptroller website, because that's where there's a lot of useful information about what's going on in New York, the work that we're doing. You can search for unclaimed funds there, find out a lot of information. It's very relevant in terms of the issues of New York. Our audits are published, as are our reports. And I think there's a lot of important information there. So osc.ny.gov is also a good place for people to go to.
So when you talk about the audits and being a kind of a fiscal watchdog, are you more typically, is your office more typical, is it more typical that you will uncover bad decisions, bad fiscal decisions that you think should be flagged and maybe reworked, or bad intentions, as in actual corruption?
Well, I think it's fair to say that your colleagues in the press tend to pay more attention when we find people stealing, right? That becomes more of an interesting headline to folks. Our audits more typically, though, are ones that find opportunities for cost savings, for improved efficiencies. They don't always get as much attention. Often they will get attention in the local press, right? If there's still a community newspaper in your area. So I would say the majority of the audits would uncover opportunities for greater efficiency and cost savings. But there are those cases where the audits find outright corruption. And as I said, they tend to get a bit more play in the press than the other audits. But they're all very important. It's all very important part of our operation, because looking out for taxpayer money, I think in any year is very, very key. But given all the challenges of budgets and questions of making government more cost effective, because everybody's feeling the pressure of the affordability crisis, I think that work is really more important than ever. One of the challenges, Evan, and I think we've talked about it with you in the past, is that we are an oversight agency, but we're not an enforcement agency. So if we are auditing a school district, let's say, and we find, we have 5 recommendations that we think would be very helpful to save money, we cannot enforce those recommendations, right? So when we do an audit report, we make the recommendations, we have an exit conference with the entity that we're auditing. They have the opportunity to dispute any of our findings, and there may be an adjustment in the final report. When we publish the final report, any entity we audit then has the opportunity to file, and we print it as part of the final audit report, their response to our recommendations. Very often we will get folks saying, yeah, these are good ideas, we're going to implement them. Sometimes we get pushback. Folks say, no, we don't agree with the Comptroller's office at all. And what we do in some cases is that we will then do a follow-up audit, especially if we think the findings are significant, because that's really the only leverage we have, if I could call it that. We can go back in and then do a follow-up audit and publish that, and really just try to point out which of our recommendations were adopted, which weren't. And again, that often puts a bit more pressure, right, when there's more sunlight on what it is that we're saying, and some attention as to whether or not the entity that we audited is following through or not. But that's one of the challenges of the job. People say, well, you made these recommendations, you identify cost savings opportunities. When you aggregate it, Evan, it's literally in the billions of dollars, especially when you look at some of the high cost programs like Medicaid, But we cannot, we don't have the authority under the law to force any government entity to adopt our recommendations, even if they're brilliant and would save a lot of money.
Talking to Tom DiNapoli, who was appointed comptroller in 2007, elected in 2010 in the only, I wouldn't even call that close, it was 4.5-point victory for Comptroller DiNapoli in 2010, and then he's been reelected easily in 2014, 2018, 2022. He is running for reelection again in 2026. And in the efforts of fairness and equal time, we always offer statewide candidates who are on the ballot a chance to come on this program. You heard from the other Democrat in the primary, Drew Warshaw, about a month ago, and today we have Tom DiNapoli on the program. So I have an email from kind of a longtime listener of the program. Rich emailed with a pretty common question he likes to ask, which is some flavor of, can you be critical of your own party? So Rich asks, what's an example of the comptroller being tough on his own party, and has he ever been critical of Governor Hochul? Comptroller DiNapoli, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, most recently, in her current budget proposal, she's following through on a pattern that we saw with some prior governors as well, to weaken the oversight authority of the Comptroller's office. We estimate that the provisions that are in the executive budget proposal would result in about $4 billion in spending where we have a pre-audit authority or a contract review authority that would be weakened or compromised. And some of that also is lessening opportunities for competitive bidding. And we have always been critical of executive efforts to, with the argument that it's more efficient, taking out our opportunity to review a contract before it's approved. And the argument sometimes goes as follows: it'll all move along more quickly if the controller just has the audit authority after the contract is let and the spending has been made. Well, the problem is, if there's weakness, if there's not good taxpayer value, to audit something after the money's already out the door, I mean, all well and good, and maybe Evan Dawson will report on that, but isn't it better to have that pre-audit authority at the front end so that you could hopefully identify any shortcoming, get the best value for New York's taxpayers, or in some cases, really have to reject, the contract and say, go back to square one. So I think the governor is wrong to have proposed that. I'm hoping that the legislature will restore that oversight authority. This has kind of been an ongoing battle. We lost a great deal of it under the previous governor, and the legislature and this governor restored much of it, but it just seems now every year there's another attempt to chip away. I think it's actually protective of the governor to give us that, to maintain that pre-audit authority. So that is the most recent example of where I've differed with Governor Hochul, and I'm hoping that I think the legislature's on my side on this one. We'll see, but I'm hoping that she will drop her interest in having that be part of the final budget agreement.
So I want to let listeners know you can join the program. You can email, as always, as Rich did. It's connections@wxxi.org. You can call the program toll-free, 844-295-TALK. It's toll-free, 844-295-8255. 263-WXXI if you call from Rochester, 263-9994. And you can join the chat on YouTube if you're watching on the WXXI News YouTube channel, where we are every afternoon. As you know, Mr. Comptroller, you have an opponent in the Democratic primary who has been pretty heavily critical of you. He was on this program, and I want to give you a chance to respond to just a few of the common critiques he is making to understand your position on them. And so the first is, I want to listen to a clip from Drew Warshaw talking about the subject of banker fees and the way that the Comptroller's office has been either protecting pension funds, state money, et cetera. Let's listen.
This guy has literally made hundreds of Wall Street bankers millionaires right under our nose. We have literally been played for suckers. He has paid $12 billion in taxpayer-funded fees to 664 Wall Street investment firms. And their whole proposition is that they could beat the market net of those fees, which sounds great, right? If they could actually beat the index and pay for their fees, it makes perfect sense. The problem is they haven't even come close. And Tom DiNapoli has not just paid them. He's quadrupled the amount of taxpayer-funded fees that he's gotten. And we calculated how much that underperformance has cost New Yorkers, because we're the ones who invest in that fund. And it has cost New York taxpayers $59.1 billion in higher taxes to bail out Tom DiNapoli and his bankers' underperformance.
All right. I'm going to give you some space to tell us what you make of that clip. Go ahead, Mr. Comptroller.
Well, Evan, can I say one thing at the outset?
Yeah.
And I know you're a fair guy usually, right? I have three opponents in this race, and I know you keep pushing Drew Warshaw. I assume that's not an endorsement.
It's not.
But
Certainly not.
I hope you will give an opportunity to the other two competitors as well.
If
the
they ask, they get it.
right?
Anybody who is on the ballot and asks for time gets it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I would hope you would reach out to them and provide that opportunity. Drew is an expert at fuzzy math and exaggeration. So let's just set a few points straight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm not going to go point for point on Drew's exaggeration and twisting of the facts. We have one of the largest pension funds in the United States of America. We don't have our final audited numbers for this year. March 31st is the end of the fiscal year. And we still have, a couple of weeks before we have the audited numbers on our private market investments. But I know we had a good year. We're going to more than meet our return. Our long-term goal, I think, as you know, is a 5.9% return. It's a more conservative investment goal than many other public pension plans. But I think being conservative, especially given the volatility in the markets, is a smarter way to position the fund to keep it strong and to keep it well-funded. So it's, rough numbers, let's say $295 billion pension fund, we'll just shy of 300 billion, rough numbers. Our fees now are a little bit less than $1 billion a year. $1 billion in a $300 billion fund is not an unreasonable fee structure. In fact, folks should not listen to me or to Drew Warshaw. You should look to the independent evaluation of our fund. So I think, Evan, as you know, every 5 years, we're audited and regulated by the Department of Financial Services. And the most recent audit, came out earlier this year. And the results are what they're saying, not what I'm saying, not what Drew Warshaw is saying. So if you're talking about performance, you can go right to the report. It says for the 3, 5, and 10-year periods, aggregate total portfolio return performance against benchmarks has been very good. If you're raising questions about fees, also the same report, it's noted that the level of investment fees and expensive, that there is no concern that those fees are excessive, no concern about the diligence conducted in monitoring them and assuring accuracy. So they're looking at objectively how the fund is managed. They're looking objectively at the level of fees. Again, keep in mind how the pension fund is structured. It's a diversified portfolio. The biggest part of the portfolio is public equities, largely invested through index funds and fixed income, treasuries, those kinds of instruments. Those we do in-house. By doing them in-house, right, we replicate the index, our own staff does it, we pay virtually no fees, right? Where we do pay fees are in the alternative investments. Why do we invest in real estate, in private equity, in infrastructure? We invest in those alternatives because we don't want to have the portfolio totally tied to the ups and downs of the public markets, to Wall Street. Some years Wall Street does very, very well. And recently Wall Street has done very, very well. And Wall Street does well. People say, well, put all your money in the stocks. Well, when the global financial crisis hits, or COVID closes things down, or the dot-com bubble bursts and 9/11 happens, then everybody says, why do you have so much money in the stock market? Shouldn't you be more diversified? Well, when you put part of your portfolio in the private markets, that's where you do pay fees. But because we save money with the majority of our investments in the public equity space and in the fixed income space, because it's in-house, we can afford the fees that we have in the private markets, and we scrutinize all those deals, and we try to get the best and the lowest fee possible. But when you look in total, the fees that we pay for a fund of our size are comparable to peers, and independent evaluations Both the Department of Financial Services review and the fiduciary review that's done every 3 years have indicated that we take the issue of fees very seriously, and we are responsible in both the level of the fees and how we manage it. You know, he talks about, what did you say that he said, 600 people on Wall Street? You know, I don't know where he gets the number from. The only thing I think he did is that he went back 20 years and added every year, you know, that we may have had managers. We don't have over 600 relationships. Yes, with private markets, because you're in effect outsourcing those investments, you do pay an investment firm to manage that money. But we have about 220 relationships. So he's kind of fooling everybody by aggregating how many managers we had over 20 years. Or sometimes it said, I think Drew was the one who said, well, he's spent $11 billion in fees. That's over 20 years. What he doesn't say is that under my leadership, the pension fund has doubled in value over that time period. The amount of benefits we've paid out to New York retirees is over $200 billion. That doesn't happen without a very smart investment strategy. And yeah, if you're using an investment firm, you are going to pay a fee. They're not going to do it as a volunteer. You're not going to get smart investment advice for free. But because we do so much of our investing in-house with passive investing, with fixed income, we can afford to pay the fees as part of that diversification so that we could be sure, not just in 1 year, but over time, we can meet our investment goal because we want to make sure the money is there for the pensioners, and we want to try to keep the rates that we charge to our government employers as stable as possible.
I will get to Raj Goyal's critique in just a moment. And the Goyal campaign has not reached out to us. They are invited to be on this program. I hope they'll take us up on that. The reason I'm referencing Drew Warshaw is because he's been on this program. And the reason I would reference you as the incumbent is because you also have been on this program and you are taking us up on the offer as well. And frankly, Mr. Comptroller, you've been one of the more accessible public officials we've ever covered. I don't say that to sort of be obsequious. It's just an observation, and we appreciate that.
And I appreciate your style of journalism. That's why I'm always happy to respond when you call.
Now, so before we get to some of what Mr. Goyal has said, just briefly, the Warshaw critique is not that that you're paying money managers on Wall Street who ostensibly can beat the market or get you a good return, and that's why you'd pay them instead of sort of finding a way to not pay a middleman. His critique is that in 2008, the market goes down. In 2014, the market goes down. And we do worse than the market. And when the market goes back up, we do worse than the market. So even when things are down and things are bad, they're worse for us. And when things are good, they're not as good. And yet we're still paying a lot of money in fees to people when we don't have to. That's what the critique sounds like. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I do. Yes. I mean, look, that's Drew Warshaw saying it. He's not an independent arbiter on our performance. Our performance is evaluated. I'll read it again. For the 3, 5, and 10-year periods, aggregate total portfolio return performance against benchmarks has been very good. We're about a 95% funded pension plan. We're the best funded of all the big state pension plans in the country. Why? Smart investment strategy, and we've had the discipline to make sure that we charge the appropriate rates to keep the plan well funded. One of the other critiques, oh, well, of course you have to pay the pensions. No, other states have laws that say they have to fund their pensions. Illinois, as an example, and they're, one of their pension funds is like 50% funded. The law says one thing. It's what the investor, in this case, the work that I do with our team managing the New York State Common Retirement Fund, what we do to make sure the money, in fact, is going to be there. And again, it's not me saying this. Don't take my word for it. Read the independent evaluations that are out there. It's on our website. People can go to the Department of Financial Services website. The fiduciary review is posted as well. I think it's incumbent upon people who care about accuracy not to believe the word of any candidate, including myself. Look at the independent evaluations that are out there. Look at how we've managed the fund. I mentioned before having the assumed rate of return at 5.9. We're one of a handful of funds that have an assumed rate of return below 6%. Why are we more conservative? Because we understand this is the people's money. First and foremost, this is money that public employees are paying into the system. It's their money. And then it's the taxpayer money that helps as well to fund the pensions. But you look over the long history of the fund, and even the recent history of my tenure, most of how we pay for pension benefits is not from employee contributions or employer contributions. It's from investment return. That's why having a smart investment strategy that doesn't just ride the market in the high years, but is a consistent performance. We're not trying to beat the markets. We're just trying to keep as close to our 5.9% goal as possible. And we have more upside than downside to that 5.9 number. But because it is a more conservative number, we're going to be more likely on an ongoing basis to continue to meet that number. And let's also recognize, there are some factors not in my control. For instance, part of the discussions going on right now as part of the budget process, as you know, is benefit enhancement, changing Tier 6. It's been a big issue. I'm sure some of your listeners have called in or public employees. I think something's going to happen on that. What exactly, I don't know. But whatever it'll be, that's going to have a cost impact on the pension fund. And we're going to have to make sure we have the money to pay for whatever enhancement there will be. And we will have the money there to pay for it. But that there are factors, beyond, market conditions that impact on the amount of money we have to deliver. We paid out last year about $16.8 billion in benefits. And, most of those benefits, I'm very proud to say, over 80% of our retirees continue to live in New York State. And, so for your region of the state, a lot of the folks who, work for the local town or village or, the city of Rochester or the school district or a state facility, because they have that defined benefit pension, they're able to continue to live in a state like New York. I'm looking out for folks like my mother, who was a clerk, worked for the county police department here, on Long Island. It's folks like her that I'm looking out for. I come from, a family of civil servants and police officers and people who work hard to get that defined benefit pension. I don't play with these numbers because it's some crazy numbers game. It's because there are real people and real families who depend on the decisions that we are making to protect their retirement security. And so many people do not have a defined benefit pension anymore. And I do everything I can to make sure our public employees can count on me to secure that retirement for them.
Briefly, because you brought up Tier 6, and then what I'm going to do is I've got some phone calls and emails to get to. We've got a lot to cover in the next half hour with Tom DiNapoli, State Comptroller, who's running for reelection. You mentioned Tier 6, and we had union leaders from around the state on this program last month talking about their desire to see changes. And for those who aren't up to speed on the debate, it's a debate about how long you have to work to be set up for pension, to be set up for retirement, what the percentages are, what you get. And the concern that union leaders have is when the system was changed, we are disincentivizing people to get into public service, that we're being hurt that way. The critics are saying, we will not be able to afford this. Do you stand on the sideline? I don't know if you weighed in on this. Do you stand on the sideline and simply say, look, we can tell you the numbers, or do you choose a side on this one, Mr. Comptroller?
Well, first of all, our responsibility when there will be a specific proposal, we do have to produce a fiscal note, right?
Yeah.
So our actuary will do an evaluation of what the cost will be, and that's part of the process that so the legislature, the governor knows what the cost will be before they vote on it, right? So what I've said is that given the fact that now about 2/3 of our employees in our system, and I think this is probably true for the other systems as well in the state, are Tier 5 and Tier 6. It's no surprise that there'd be a real concern about enhancing benefits. There is an issue of recruitment and retention of public workers across the board. I think that only became worse, with COVID and what that did in terms of disrupting the workplace. So what I've said is certainly it's a reasonable conversation because our plans in New York are so well funded, and by our plans I mean the state fund that I'm responsible for, the teachers' retirement fund, and then you have 5 New York City plans. So all of those pension funds they're at different levels, but they're all well funded, certainly compared to national numbers. we can have the conversation about benefit enhancement. What I've also said is that we have to understand that there is a cost impact, and we don't want to go too far too fast. There have already been some changes to Tier 6. There's already changes in the vesting period, some changes on overtime. Vesting used to be 10 years down to 5 years, changing the final average salary calculation from 5 years to 3 years. These are changes that have already happened. So I think if there are some more incremental changes that would not be inappropriate, I think it would help us with recruitment and retention. But again, the negotiation for that is between the governor and the legislature, and we'll provide the fiscal note, and we'll see what comes out. I think something is going to happen. I think there's been, the case has effectively been made by labor that now's the time to do some enhancement. One of the challenges clearly is that different unions have different priorities in terms of what they like to see. So I think part of the the discussions that are going on now is how to pick and choose between the menu of what the different unions are looking for and see what we can come up with.
When we come back from this early break, emails, phone calls, and a lot more for Tom DiNapoli, the New York State Comptroller who is running for re-election. He's in the Democratic primary in June, and we're coming right back on Connections. This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. An email from Wendy dovetails with one of the critiques from one of the Democrats in the race for controller. Raj Goyal talks about divesting from fossil fuels. And Goyal writes on his website that the controller controls nearly $300 billion in pension investments, yet the incumbent continues to invest money into fossil fuel companies that are destroying our planet and increasingly becoming stranded assets. Wendy in Rochester writes to say, Evan, I want to say that I admire Tom DiNapoli's record on combating fraud. What concerns me is that in a state that has abjured further fossil fuel extraction, while managing pensions for people who serve the state, at least partly to make the state a good place for their children and future generations, why has he taken so long to put more attention to getting our funds out of fossil fuel investments, which in any case have been lying to investors, have been losers against the general markets for decades at a time, and when they do well are highly volatile? Even if they did well consistently, I would like to think that there are some ethical guardrails on where we invest. Or is that a matter for the legislature to decide? And if so, would he support such guardrails? So that's from Wendy, kind of dovetails with what one of your opponents in the race says. What do you make of that, Mr. Comptroller?
Well, I would just say generally we take the view that we want to invest the money so that we get a good return to provide for the pensions. We understand that climate is a serious issue. I had the privilege to be invited to participate in the COP convening in Paris when the Paris Agreement was hammered out, because we have been doing some innovative steps as far as investing with a view towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, there's a history here. We convened a decarbonization advisory panel a number of years ago to look at this question about how we can have the fund comport with the goals of Paris, because I do think climate is a risk to the climate change is a risk to the planet, certainly a risk to our investment portfolio as well. And it was interesting that that panel of experts did not recommend wholesale divestment of our energy stocks or fossil fuel stocks. What it laid out, and this became the basis for our climate action plan, and I would have Wendy go to our website, not the campaign website, the government website, because we have our climate action plan up there, which we recently updated, which talks about the multi-pronged strategy that we have. Certainly part of it is looking at our investments, and what we've done on the energy sector is look at different sectors of energy investments, fossil fuel investments, with a view towards minimum standards that we expect of the companies. And when companies fail those minimum standards, we have a number of options, including possible restriction of those investments or divestment. So we looked at some of the subsectors of this, right? Coal, shale oil, gas, tar sands, integrated oil and gas. And so in fact, I think it's about 50 companies in the fossil fuel industry we've restricted, meaning limited investment, or in some cases outright, divested. Divestment only happens after we do an evaluation of the economic impact on the fund. So in some cases, we have not been able to fully divest. So let me give a specific example. We felt Exxon was falling short. That obviously has been a part of the portfolio for a long time. So we restricted investment in Exxon. So no active management. We sold off any of our actively managed stocks in Exxon. The parts that we did keep are in the index funds. Get back to the earlier conversation. When you're doing an index, and we tend to like just, kind of plain vanilla indexes, you ride the market, you're invested broadly. And these companies are still part of the indexes. And when you look, across the country, even New York City, which has done some significant divestment of fossil fuels, all of the New York City pension funds have not divested from fossil fuels. State Teachers has not divested from fossil fuels. It's only been in rare circumstances, and usually it's a university endowment that has a different mandate in terms of what they're trying to do with their investments. You're not seeing wholesale divestment from public pension funds and fossil fuels. I would like to see us transition. We have a goal of net zero by 2040 for our portfolio. The other parts that I want to mention quickly, Evan, because Wendy's asking an important question, is seizing opportunities. Now, I don't agree with what the Trump administration is doing, which is undoing so much of the progress that we were making as a nation, moving us out of the consensus that came out of the Paris Agreement. But, certainly globally and even in this country, there are opportunities to invest as part of the change. So we have a part of our portfolio that's focused on climate solutions, clean energy, new energy sources. So we want to be able to make money for the fund while we're doing something good. So we have a goal of about 40 billion on sustainable investing in climate solutions. We've got about 28 billion out the door. Not all that is climate solutions, but a big part of it is. So we're trying to be proactive in being part of the need to support the transition. And the third prong of the strategy is advocacy, particularly at the federal level. We've been very, very clear from a public policy perspective that we don't agree with the direction, especially now with the leadership or lack of leadership of the EPA. And the last thing I'll mention is, as a shareholder, we are always in the forefront of voting against boards of directors at particularly fossil fuel companies that are not doing more to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and their traditional investments. The reality is some of these companies are going to be part of the transition. We want to push them all to be part of the transition. And so being engaged in this debate in a proactive way, I think is more effective. If we could solve climate change by just selling our stock, I think everybody would want to do that. But when you sell the stock, all it means is someone else is going to buy it that probably doesn't have the same attitude about climate that we do. And I think that's why virtually all public pension plans are still invested to some degree in these stocks.
Okay, so I want to make sure I understand this correctly before we move on here. It is not that you are indifferent to whether the state is invested in fossil fuel companies. It's that, like the Exxon Mobils of the world, you try to set a minimum standard that companies have to meet, that divestment is a possible outcome if companies fall short. But you don't want to completely divest because you want to stay in the conversation on what fossil fuel companies are doing?
No, most of our investments in this area are through those index funds that I talked about earlier, right? So the integrity of the index fund falls apart if you start divesting from all kinds of companies because you don't agree with their business plan, right? So we have done some divestments where it hasn't harmed our basic investment strategy or harmed the index. Where we are still invested through the index funds, we are very proactive. We have very clear proxy guidelines. We have a very active corporate engagement, particularly focused on climate issues. I sit on the board of Ceres, which is a very important environmental organization that particularly works with investors on trying to push corporate America to address this issue. So it is a multi-pronged strategy. But again, as I said earlier, if selling stock would end the climate crisis, I think everybody would be happy to do that. It may make people feel good to say, I'm going to divest all this stock. But very few public pension plans, as I said, even New York City, which has done more divesting than we have, they haven't divested all of it because it's not going to solve the problem that Wendy would. And I appreciate our urgency. Selling a stock is not going to deal with the issue.
Oh, okay. But the way I should have asked it then is it possible if you said, look, I'm the controller, I was elected, we've got a set of values, and we are going to divest. It's going to be complicated. These things are tied up in very complicated financial instruments, but we're going to try to scrub it, and we're going to get out all the fossil fuels out. Could you do that?
I think it'd be very hard to untangle. Look, we're very big. We're invested in a lot of stuff. If you're going to be a purist, Evan, and say every single investment that is somehow connected with a fossil fuel, you're not going to be a part of, I don't really know any public pension plan that's ever done that, including our friends in New York City that have been very aggressive on this.
Okay.
So.
All right. Let's get back to some feedback from the audience. This is Robert in Fairport. Hey, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I looked up the New York State Pension Fund is about 15% invested in private equity. That just strikes me as a lot. The thing with private equity is that the private equity is not subject to the same level of scrutiny that publicly traded companies are. Certainly, publicly traded companies, all eyes are on them. They have certain accounting rules they have to follow, and so on and so forth. The thing with private equity is that the rules are looser, the scrutiny is less. It just seems more like gambling, and you got a lot of hedge funds out there, and very few funds beat the market. I think there's a saying that the Market Timers Hall of Fame is an empty room. So I'm kind of curious why we have so much in private equity.
Okay, Mr. Comptroller?
Yeah, I mean, 50% is the goal. We're probably a little bit less than that in terms of what's actually there. And again, private equity is not timing the market. I mean, just the opposite. That's part of why we're in private equity, because you do the investment and then you realize the return, 7-10 years down the road, which for a pension fund, because we have a long-term investment horizon, we like the stability that an investment strategy like that brings, because we don't want to be stuck with the timing of the markets because of the volatility in the markets. But by the markets, I mean the public markets. So you also have to keep in mind, there's been a tremendous move over a number of years now where more and more companies are private rather than publicly listed. So there's been a whole change just in terms of how companies are being set up, how they're being managed. I mean, I certainly agree that and part of it is because of the scrutiny and the transparency and accountability of public companies. You don't have as many companies going public anymore, or you have many public companies that then go private. So you can't ignore the private markets. Robert, I think we said his name, has mentioned hedge funds. We don't do hedge funds investments. When I first took over, we had a part of the portfolio on hedge funds, and we probably have a couple of legacy funds that we haven't closed out, but we haven't made a new hedge fund investment in well over a decade, for the very reasons that Robert mentioned: lack of transparency. I just felt it was not an area, and unfortunately, the investment team agreed we would not go there. Where we have been doing more, and it's a newer part of the portfolio, and it gets back to Wendy's question as well. We traditionally had private equity and real estate, and then we had a bit of hedge funds. So we've moved out of hedge funds, maintained private equity and real estate, and actually upped it a bit. And we've added infrastructure, because it's in the infrastructure space where we found some of those opportunities as far as clean energy and renewables, and to be part of the transition to deal with the issue of climate. So that is a private market category, but one where I think there have been some great opportunities. And I want Robert to realize, under New York law, we are limited in how much money we could put in private markets. It's something called the basket clause. So there's actually a statutory limit on how much money we could put in private markets, and we don't go beyond that limit. In fact, the legislature, I think a year, maybe 2 years ago, put in a bit more flexibility on that, but we stay within the basket because of some of the concerns that you've identified. So there are statutory limits on how much money we could put in private markets, but as part of a diversified portfolio for a large institutional investor, again, we're no different than others that are managing hundreds of billions of dollars of funds. Private markets is part of a strong, well-diversified institutional investment portfolio. And we are very, very careful in scrutinizing any investment that we have. We are always very close with our managers, and we hold them accountable. If an issue comes up, let's say on a labor issue, we're always back there. We have very clear principles on workforce management. With our real estate investments, we have very clear principles on responsible contracting that we ask those to adhere to. None of those private market investments are signed off on unless, in addition to our professional staff, in terms of our staff on our team, as well as independent outside consultants, they have to review and sign off on it. So we're very careful on where we put our money if it involves a private market investment like a private equity or real estate.
All right, I want to get to an issue that came up in a previous conversation. Again, all of the candidates who are on statewide ballots are invited on this program. The incumbent controller, Tom DiNapoli, is joining us this hour. And one of the candidates who is running against him has previously been on this program. Drew Warshaw leveled a critique about unclaimed funds. Now, you heard Comptroller DiNapoli mention $20 billion in an unclaimed funds, essentially a bank account with your money for New Yorkers, for lack of a better term. And it could be a lot of different reasons that New Yorkers don't know that their money is in these funds. The controller has a website set up allowing New Yorkers to kind of find that and get connected to their money. But one of the candidates in the race says that that has not been sufficient, and I want to listen to that critique.
This is exactly Tom DiNapoli's line. This is what he does. He scares New Yorkers into thinking this can't possibly be done. We can't possibly give people their money back automatically because there would be massive fraud. Well, why has Illinois been able to figure this out? Why has North Carolina been able to figure this out? Why have other states been able to figure this out without any signs of fraud? The reason is because they have a level of urgency and understanding of technology, and they have modernized their systems, which Tom DiNapoli has failed to do. And in 2026, we don't need for you to prove and go through all the hoops and paperwork to say who you are. We can figure that out yourself. Our technology, my phone knows exactly who I am. It knows my favorite color. The state comptroller has access to all of this data. We could just send you your money. And in the middle of an affordability crisis, it is literally the job description of the state comptroller to do that. And since getting into office, the number of unclaimed funds have nearly tripled under his watch.
All right, Mr. DiNapoli. So go ahead here. The floor is yours. Tell us about the unclaimed funds.
When I grow up, I want to live in Drew Warshaw's fantasy land. It must be a wonderful place with lollipops and rainbows all over. He's totally irresponsible on so many levels. First of all, one of the reasons why unclaimed funds have been growing is that we have stepped up how aggressive we are in auditing financial institutions to make sure that they're not holding on to the money. So the kind of recoveries we've been getting have been growing. And also, there are new kinds of financial instruments that have been coming into the fund. For instance, in recent years, we're getting a big influx of gift cards that weren't used or expired. So it's been a new source of revenue. And laws have changed where dormancy periods, over my time have been shortened. So the financial institutions have to turn the money over more quickly. We have made it a priority from the beginning of my tenure to inform New Yorkers about how they could access the system and get their money returned. We are always going to events. When I started, you had to send in a paper record to get an unclaimed fund. It was very cumbersome. People just didn't want to do it. We modernized the system, put the website up. We've recently enhanced that website again. 2 years ago, working with the legislature, we started an expedited program where we are sure that we have the rightful owner for accounts of $250 or less, where we will get the check directly out, take out that middle step of coming to us. And Evan, we have just launched now an expansion of that program to accounts of $5,000 as the amount or less. So, we're doing what other states have been doing. I don't want to send money to people. It's not their rightful money. I think that's irresponsible, number one. Number two, these accounts go back to the 1940s. Some of the information is not complete. Some of them are in the names of people who passed away. We're not going to send a check to someone who died in 1950 because they may have rightful heirs out there who want to claim that money. And that's why you can't just send the money out, because if someone is claiming money for a deceased parent or a grandparent, we need information like a death certificate, proof that you're the rightful heir. So there's no, there's $20 billion they're sitting on and you just mail it all out. completely irresponsible. And I think, as you know, I'm sure we've talked about on your show in the past, we have accounts that are valued at that. The money is not sitting there. The money every year we keep enough to be able to return based on what we know the claims will be, what we estimate they will be. Money then beyond that is used as part of the general fund. That is no different than it's ever been. But we absolutely understand that this is not our money, it's the people's money. And we have been very aggressive in stepping up our outreach to have people understand how they can easily get that money. So I would just encourage your viewers and your listeners, go to our website, just put in New York State Comptroller, click on unclaimed funds. You want to talk to a human being during regular business hours, call 1-800-221-9311, especially if it's one of those estate claims. We can walk you through, how you do that. Accounts are in the name of businesses, nonprofits, and again, many of these accounts are incomplete in the information. You can't just mail out checks blindly.
Understood.
We will only mail out a check if we are sure that we've identified the rightful owner.
Mr. DiNapoli, thank you. And he's talking about the official New York State website. We'll link to that in our show notes. The campaign website to learn more about Comptroller DiNapoli is DiNapoli4NewYork.com. Mr. Comptroller, thank you for the time. As always, we look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Evan. Take good care.
More connections coming up.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.